All right, let's talk about one of the oldest, most chaotic royal moments that just refuses to die down: Prince Archie's birth. Not because of the baby himself, it because of the circus that surrounded his arrival. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry managed to turn a royal birth, something that's usually handled with precision and tradition, into a confusing mess full of contradictions, scissory, and what a lot of people now believe was a full-blown cover-up. And the more you look into it, the stranger it gets. I will say that, like a lot of people, I saw the Getty images of Thepi Lau dropping behind the skirt and thought at first they could be photoshopped, but Getty images is very reliable. The official story was simply as Meghan went into labor early in the morning, gave birth, and later that day the palace made an announcement. But that's just the version we were spoon-fed. One you start pulling back the layers, nothing adds up. Take the timing for example. Meghan supposedly went into labor in theory hours, yet the palace waited almost 12 hours to tell the media. Why? Even more confusing, by the time they did make the announcement, Meghan had already given birth. Now you might think maybe it was just a private moment for them, no big deal. But here's the thing: Harry and Meghan's PR team had previously promised to alert the press when she went into labor. That was their own commitment. Then suddenly silence. So when reporters asked about it, the palace gave this carefully worded statement that dodged the real issue and shifted blame onto the media for misinterpreting their timing clause-acquisal words. It gets worse. During the small window between the palace saying Meghan was in labor in the Instagram post announcing the baby's birth, journalist asked directly if the baby had already been born, and palace officials denied. That's not a miscommunication, that's lying. And look, people can debate whether Meghan used a surrogate, whether she wore a moon bump, or whether any of the theories floating around are true. But those details, while juicy, aren't even the point. The point is that Harry and Meghan lied. The palace lied for them on diff. There's one thing the monarchy isn't supposed to do, it's lie about the basics of succession. One person who's been banging this drum for years is Dan Wootton. Back in 2019, he was an executive editor at The Sun and probably the first mainstream journalist to call out how bizarre this whole situation was. He actually got Buckingham Palace to answer 8 direct questions on the record about Archie's birth, an almost unheard of move. That alone should tell you how rattled they were. The palace knew something didn't look right. One of Dan's main theories was that the announcement was delayed on purpose to sync up with us morning news cycle. He pointed out, the timing of everything lined up perfectly with the 8 a.m. New York shows like CBS This Morning, where Gayle King just so happens to be a friend of Meghan's. The palace denied it, of course. But when every move seems to benefit the Sussex's American PR game, it's hard not to raise an eyebrow. And this isn't about attacking Meghan for the sake of it. It's about transparency. If you're a royal couple funded by the taxpayers with a Bobby in the line of succession, then you don't get to cherry-pick privacy when it's convenient. You can't play the wound's privacy card while also stagging photos and releasing carefully curated documentaries. This wasn't just bad PR. This was a total media disaster, and if the goal was to protect their privacy, it backfired spectacularly. Now nobody trusts the story they told, not the timeline, not the announcements, not even the baby bump and dents. You lose public trust, especially Asa Royal. It's almost impossible to get it back. Meghan's bump became its own storyline. The internet noticed it first. One day it looked massive, the next day it was almost flat. Videos started circulating where her stomach seemed to fold as she sat down, leading to wild speculation. Was it a moon bump? A padded prosthetic? Theories flooded in, and instead of clearing things up, Harry and Meghan leaned further into secrecy. That salons added fuel to the fire. People weren't speculating, they were becoming convinced something was buying. Hidden mainstream media didn't want touch. Too controversial, too close to conspiracy. But that's where journalists lost its edge. The job isn't to protect people from uncomfortable questions. Ask them, and Meghan's pregnancy had questions stacked from top to bottom. He'd big outlets steered clear, only a few like Dan Wooten were willing to press Palace, and when they did, the answers were robotic, generic, and always avoided. Cora issue why the lies one moment stood out the twerking video. Meghan was supposedly in labor with baby Leet. Yet there was a video of her dancing, smiling, Dan looking completely relaxed, released around. The same time it made people do a double take. The timeline didn't make sense. It made even those who never questioned the first pregnancy start asking, hold on, what is going on here? Camilla Tominey, a respected associate editor at the Daily Telegraph, wrote about it but never once considered that bump might be fake when Challenge Edge responded as if even raising the question was beneath her. That's that problem. Journalists pretending they're too respectable to explore legitimate and sophistis. The palace had stuck to tradition and simply told the truth, or even half the truth. None of this would have spiraled, but once you start lying, every new move looks suspicious even more. Bizarre Washoe, the palace handled Harry and Meghan's communication strategy. It was chaotic. Announcements were delayed. Emails supposedly when unsent. Timelines didn't match. At one point the palace actually blamed a technical issue for not alerting the press on time in 2019. As iPhones don't exist, it wasn't just a it looked like a clumsy cover. Open Buckingham Palace, the symbol of order and protocols suddenly looked disorganized. And weak. And then there's Instagram post. That's how the world officially found out about Archie's birth. Not a formal royal statement. Not at traditional press conference, just a post on social media. And during that brief window when journalists asked if Meghan had given birth, the palace straight up said no. They denied it, knowing full well baby was already born. That's separate. That crosses the line because that's not a spin. That's just lying. Harry and Meghan's team tried to frame everything around privacy. But when your child is in line for the throne, privacy stops being just a personal preference site, becomes a matter of public trust. You are not just a couple, you're an institution. You don't get to rewrite a royal tradition just because you feel like it, and every time they tried, it blew up in their face. Worse still, they dragged the palace down with them. Buckingham Palace looked like it was following their lead instead of setting the tone, and in doing so, it lost credibility. The whole situation left royal watchers confused, journalists frustrated, and the public suspicious. This wasn't just a media strategy gone wrong. It became a symbol of how fractured things had gotten between Harry, Meghan, and the crown, and that's what's so maddening. This could have been a moment of celebration, unity, event modernity. Instead, it became a masterclass in how not to handle royal communication. Questions didn't stop after Archie's birth. They kept multiplying. One big one was about the photo call at Windsor Castle. Harry and Meghan introduced their baby to the world in a controlled, carefully staged moment with no outside press, no real spontaneity. It was scheduled at 12:40 p.m. UK time, which just so happens to perfectly match the 7:40 a.m. broadcast lit on American morning shows. Peel Plano tasked. Was that just a coincidence, or were the Sussexes more focused on their media presence than their role within the British monarchy? Don Wooden went straight at this question and asked the police directly, was the photo call time chosen to sync with American news shows? To answer a cold, scripted no. The time was chosen based on the family's visitor Windsor to introduce Archie to the Queen and Prince Philip. But even that didn't line up. Why would a royal fatoop, one of the most anticipated public events, get slotted around a private family visit? It felt off. It's like someone always working backwards from a U.S. media schedule and pretending it was just royal logistics and author mystery. Where was Archie actually born? Harry spoke about the experience in glowing, emotional, detailed ticking about how amazing Meghan was during labor. Yet the palace refused to confirm the location of the birth. That alone stirred speculation. Every royal baby before him had their birthplace at Concord, so why hide this if it was just a normal hospital birth? What ways there to cover up the refusal to answer were made? people more curious, not less Anthone. There was the line of, succession as son of Prince Archie is a direct descendant in the royal line. That means legal documentation, pro-pair announcement procedures, and formal acknowledgement from the palace, era critical, but with this birth, the usual signoffs were either late, vague, or completely missing. Royal birth announcements are typically marked with details, like the attending physician, the hospital, and a statement outside the palace. None of that happened. Instead, we get a delayed press release in a filtered Instagram message to make things more confusing. The palace initially tried to act like nothing was unusual, but the contradictions were piling up. One outlet was told Meghan went tanto labor. Another was told she'd already given birth, and when reporters pressed for clarity, palace press officers got Kai at one point. They even claimed the announcement was delayed due to an email failure. That's the excuse in a palace filled with staff, advisors, and PR pros. They claimed an email didn't go in time. If this had happened on, some people might have let it go, but through whole thing was tangled in inconsistency after inconsistency gone. And Harry wanted to modernize the monarchy, but they ended up introducing Kuwas. They didn't seem to understand, or Madame didn't care, that when you wear the crone's weight, you don't get to control the narrative completely, and when you tree, the backlash can be brutal. Their actions didn't just raise eyebrows, they created a vacuum of trust, and in that vacuum, theories exploded. Some claimed Meghan had used a surrogate. Others believed she wore a fake bump. More extreme takes said Archie was a Barawidabi, or that he didn't even exist. Those theories didn't come out of nowhere. They were born from the couple's refusal to communicate clearly and the palace's willingness to demand it. This was never about hate, it was about truth, and the truth is still missing. What we don't know, beyond all the speculation, is that Meghan and Harry lied the palace back to them, and the public was left with a royal mystery that still hasn't been solved.